Sonic Adventure, a game we all know and love. A classic game from 1998. Since then, the game has been released all over the place. It's been on the Dreamcast, the GameCube, the Xbox 360, the PS3, the PC, twice? And I've played many of these versions of the games, and spent hundreds of hours in it. But I wanted a challenge this time around, a unique way of playing the game. So it hit me. What if I tried to beat the game with just voice controls? I know it sounds kind of crazy to play a 3D platformer with just voice controls, but can you actually beat the game like that? Well, that's what I set out to do here. And a quick side note before we get started here, this was all streamed right here live on my YouTube channel, so if you enjoyed this content, remember to like and subscribe to see more of it in the future. Like every playthrough of Sonic Adventure, we start with an introduction to our favorite drippy boy, Chaos. Of course, this being the first boss, it's kind of easy. You just move to avoid attacks and then attack while he's on the ground. This was more of us getting used to the new controls that I would be using for this entire playthrough. I will say, it was a pretty poor introduction as it did not prepare me for anything that was ahead. But moving past that and moving into the next stage, our first action stage, Emerald Coast. Again, with this being the first action stage of the game, it wasn't anything too tough. You just kind of move through the stage until you get to the end. No major obstacles or anything like that, just us learning controls. Though there is one mechanic to note here, and that is these number panels where you jump off of each by hitting the A button a lot to jump. Well, in this case, we can't really do that with voice controls. Luckily, there is an alternate route in this level, so we took that and we were on our way. This was a pretty easy stage overall. I say that, but the stage still took me half an hour, and that gives you an indication how well the rest of the run goes. I had no idea how long this run was really going to take me. Before we head to the next stage, we have to fight another boss. This would be our first run-in with the Doctor himself, Eggman. In this fight, he uses his Egg Hornet to drill into the ground and attack you. Whenever he drills in, you attack him. Sounds pretty simple, but I really gotta load this. Again, this boss was pretty simple. It still took about 30 minutes, but we did run into an issue where the voice controls would not work or would not pick up correctly, so that is something to look out for in the future. After besting the Egg Hornet, it was time to move on to our next action stage. But yet, this is where we have to talk about another mechanic, and that would be the hub worlds of Sonic Adventure. It sounds simple enough, just go to the entrance of the stage that you want to go to. Well, while playing through the story mode, some of them either have puzzles or keys that you need to unlock them. In this case, the Windstone. And, well, voice controls don't make for the most accurate of controls. So, this took almost an hour to get into this stage alone. Just because I had to try and position myself in a way where I could pick up the stone and not spin dash into oblivion. It was definitely not due to me fucking up the controls in any way. Couldn't have been that. With all that out of the way, we finally move on to Windy Valley. Nothing in this stage was too hard, but there was a lot more timing based obstacles, so I had to do those a few times just to get them right with voice controls. Until the jump pads come back with a vengeance. Since I didn't use them in Emerald Coast, they were determined to be in my way this time around. At some point in this stage, you enter a tornado and you must climb up it to exit the top. One of the final obstacles is to use these jump pads to climb even higher. And so we were kind of stuck. So I did what I do best and beat my head against a wall. So I kept trying and trying and trying, till eventually I just got it through brute force. And so I was finally able to exit the tornado and complete the rest of the stage, which was pretty similar to the first half, with just a bit of timing I had to repeat a couple times. It was finally time to go gambling in Casinopolis after this, though there was a bit of a roadblock getting into that stage as well. We needed to get an upgrade for Sonic called the Lightspeed Dash, which lets you dash across a line of rings. The reason we need to get this is so that we can hit this button to open up the doors to the casino. I also really slept on this power-up. This was going to be one of the most important power-ups in the entire run. This upgrade's in the sewer, and it doesn't seem too hard because you just have to jump up a ledge, and then you just get them, use it, and you're out. Or at least that's what I thought going into it. Trying to line myself up to get onto this ledge was near impossible with the voice controls. Eventually I grew frustrated and I just started attacking over and over and over again. Somehow this actually worked and I clipped through the wall and I got the power up. And so we finally made it into the stage. So normally this stage has very little platforming, which sounds great for this run as it would be an easy stage. The idea is you come to this button, get picked up by these claws, and they shake the rings out of you to make a pile so you can reach the Chaos Emerald. This sounds simple enough. Well, to get the rings you have to play pinball. And of course, our voice controls aren't really set up specifically for pinballs, so they don't work well. The way pinball works is, as long as you get 100 rings within the game, it drops you right back into the casino. All fine and dandy. But if you're poor and have less than 100 rings, you get put into the sewer, like the trash you are. That's where I ended up most of the time. And while it's not a long section, there are plenty of ways for you to lose all of your rings along the way to the end. So I kept doing this over and over and over again. Eventually, after over an hour, I had enough rings stacked up so I could reach the emerald. And then it was done. We could finally move on from this grueling stage. But not before we pick up the ice stone to enter our next stage. Picking up the stone this time wasn't all that bad, so we entered the stage without much issue. This is one of the stages that me and many others thought were going to be a massive issue in this run. So how was Ice Cap in the end? There are a lot of timed obstacles and very precise obstacles in this stage, so I thought I wasn't going to be able to beat it before I started playing. But actually getting into the stage, I realized it wasn't all that bad. I just had to be very precise with my commands. Especially this spot right here, because if you fall, you have to do the entire area again, and it is quite a long segment because there's no checkpoint near it. But to my surprise, I actually got it in one shot. With that out of the way, the rest of the stage basically played itself as it is just a snowboarding section. Then it was time to fight Knuckles, our good pal, which as usual is pathetic. Though immediately after that we do have a real boss. And I won't lie and say this boss wasn't tough and really did eat away at my spirit during this challenge. Chaos 4. Everyone hates him in the normal game, and I hate him even more here. For this boss, you're put in a pond with these lily pads. Of course, you have to stand on these lily pads or you sink into the water. While you're standing on the water, after a few seconds you'll take damage. While doing all of this, you have to avoid attacks from Chaos 4 and then attack him when he surfaces. It's simple enough. The only issue here is the voice controls aren't accurate enough or fast enough to let me jump to the other lily pads. So I had to just keep jumping the entire time so I wouldn't take damage from sinking in the water, but also hope that I didn't get hit by attacks by Chaos. Which wasn't too bad considering the camera follows him during the boss fight. This allowed me to attack him whenever he came up because I could just go his way. Except when avoiding his attacks, if you get too close to the edge of the arena, the camera completely freaks out and you no longer are centered on him. So you can't fight him anymore, at least with voice controls. So we had to rely on a little bit of luck here, and eventually we got him, although it did take me forever. After we beat Chaos 4, we watched the egg carrier launch. And so we take to the skies to chase after Eggman. Which brings us to Sky Chase Act 1. And there is absolutely nothing to say about this stage, as I just sat in the left corner and literally did nothing. After this, I wandered around aimlessly for a while, before I realized I actually had to help Amy. To do that, I needed to follow her through Twinkle Park, which I thought was going to be a pretty easy stage overall, but I was wrong, because I forgot about the cart section. Normally this is a pretty fun little start to the stage, you beat some enemies, steal their cart, and then ride the track. But in this challenge it became a game of survival. When I wasn't being hit by other carts because I couldn't really dodge them, I was sent careening off the track because of the weird physics. Eventually we got through this too, it just took a really long time. The rest of the stage after this is more so what I was thinking, where it wasn't too tough, it just took a little bit longer than normal. After this stage we head into Speed Highway. And this stage gave me almost no issue at all actually. Well, as smooth as voice controls get at least. So, we were once again on our way to the egg carrier, and to do that, we need to go through Red Mountain. But first, we need to pick up the light speed attack, which would end up actually being an invaluable tool. And so we enter Red Mountain, which the game accurately refers to as Hell. This stage by far was the toughest in the entire game, which was a surprise to me. So we'll talk about it one step at a time here. Starting with these damn seesaws. While on these platforms, Sonic will continue to slide around due to the weird physics, and they never stop swaying. Combine this with the terrible camera angle the game gives you, and it makes it really tough with voice controls at least. And that was just to make one of the jumps. I had to do that a couple times in a row without failing, or I would have to start the whole section over again. And that's if I didn't die, which would send me even further back. This alone took me 3 hours to do, and that's nowhere near the end of the stage. Our next troubles start once we enter this kind of lava cavern here. There's a couple elements that combine here to make this entire area very tough. At certain points, the lava rises, making your time very limited for actions you can do. So my moves had to be absolutely precise. Also in the lava, you have these platforms you have to jump on to get across it. And they tilt once you're on them, so Sonic will start to slide into the lava, making yet another time constraint for the actions I have and the controls I can do. For a lot of these platforms, I end up using iframes, so I don't have to worry about the accurate platforming so much. But that only got me so far. After a specific set of these platforms, you actually have to jump across these enemies to get to the other side, then the lava will rise, and you have to make it to the end before the lava gets you essentially. This was very tough because while homing attack is great because it does go automatically to the next enemy, it does not always face you the right direction, which was the case here. This is another point where it seemed like the run was dead because I couldn't get across. That is until I remembered the light speed attack, which in the normal game is mostly useless, but here it let me hit all of the enemies and get to the other side without any issue. And after that, I finally made it to another checkpoint, just before the final challenge of this level, which would actually be another set of those platforms. What makes these ones so tricky is you jump off of this spring and land on the platforms. You then have to wait for the lava to rise up so you can make it to this little island by homing attacking these enemies. Well, due to my controls, I was not able to make it to those enemies, so I couldn't really do this. So I had to think of a completely unique way to do this area. My sanity was kind of worn out at this point because I had tried it so many times and been on this level for so long. So I had a crazy idea. If I could tilt the platform just right, I could spin and launch myself to the island. So I tried and I tried and I tried until eventually this happened. Attack, run, stop, back, step, right, step, spin, attack. And with that, we were basically at the end of the stage. There was no more challenges from here. And this brought us into Sky Chase Act 2, which was mostly like the first, except the ending I actually had to shoot a giant cannon. The only issue was my controls were too sensitive because sensitivity changes for this part of the game while you're using the tornado controls. So I ended up playing the stage about 6 times while I tweaked my controls so I could actually aim. But we also eventually got through that, which made it time for Skydeck. Another level which looked very daunting. It took quite a while to beat, but there was nothing specifically tough, it's just kind of a long level. It also helps that there's quite a few checkpoints in the level, so nothing was ever a huge challenge because I never had to do too many things in one life. So it was time for yet another boss, Chaos 6. The final form of Chaos will actually take on in this playthrough. I thought you had to pick up these little ice machines and throw them at Chaos, but it turns out you can actually just hit them and he will suck them up himself. So this boss ended up being pretty easy, although I had to rely on a little bit of luck for his attack cycles just so that he would actually suck up these ice machines. So it was over pretty quickly and brought us to our next action stage, which was Lost World. And anyone who knows this game knows why I thought this was going to be a problem. The main challenge of this stage was actually going to be one big room. That's because it has this giant wooden snake. And what you have to do is actually ride this snake around the water, pressing different buttons to open a door up top and also rise the water level so that you can make it to that door. And this was actually a lot easier than I thought because the platforming wasn't nearly as precise as I thought it needed to be. It just took me a while because every time I did fail, I would die and have to restart the whole section, which is kind of long when you have only voice controls. But there was one section I completely forgot about. It was this room with these wall running panels. They weren't specifically tough so much as they took a long time because, once again, like the snake, if you fall down, you have to start the entire section over again. And it is a pretty big room. There's no notable moments in this level other than I got stuck on this mirror in the dark area one time just because, again, my controls were too sensitive. And so we finally beat the level. And now, the end was truly in sight because we were on to the final action stage. But before we can enter that, we actually have to do this puzzle where we have to light up all of these buttons. I thought it was going to be really tough at first, but I pretty much got instant access to the stage. I came into this stage very motivated as it was the last one, but that would be crushed almost immediately. And it was all because of these damn conveyor belts. There are 3 of these you have to jump across here, with spikes at the end of them. The timing was really hard to get down, so I couldn't do it. But there is a lower section, which you do go to if you hit some of the spikes, or they'll take you to a pit, but the first set here takes you to the bottom area. So I tried the bottom path for a while as well, and then ended up running into a similar issue. There was conveyor belts on the bottom as well. So now I had a choice to make. I could either keep going for the bottom path because it's easier to get to, or I could continue to try the top path. So I did some investigating of the bottom path, and upon going to the other side, I realized it actually just leads back to the top. This was a major blow to my morale, to say the least. So I had no choice but to do the top path, which I already thought was near impossible. But eventually, one of my attempts would take me almost to the end. I was reinvigorated at this point. And then someone in my chat questioned whether this was possible or not, and that was all the motivation I need, because then this happened. Step, step, left, attack, step, attack, step, attack, left, attack, step, attack, attack. I told you it was possible. After this, there was yet another platforming segment, which, if you fell, meant you had to restart the whole thing. So it was another one that took a really long time to do, but was also had one tricky jump in it, which I end up using the lightspeed dash so I can actually make it across the pit without moving forward and killing myself. When I did make it across, I actually ended up falling through the elevator you ride for a checkpoint. But my chat convinced me to pretend it counted anyways because it goes to a new area and it is a checkpoint, and there's no reason I should have fallen through the elevator. The last challenge of this stage would actually be a room with infinitely respawning enemies, which I ended up just attacking a lot until I eventually got lucky and made it to the ladder on the other side. There was no clear way to do this with my controls other than using the light speed attack, so I could attack a lot of them all at once. But even this was kind of random where I would end up, so it was basically just luck at that point. And with that, we were able to beat the rest of the stage without much issue, other than me killing myself right at the end because I got a little bit cocky. And so the final stage was beat. The stage was set. It was time for the final boss, which was going to be very tough because there was very limited room to work with, and the way my controls were set up, they would just keep running in directions that I told it. Other than the small adjustment ones I had, which I ended up using a lot in this fight, the way you do this fight is you just dodge his attacks until eventually he extends his tail out like this, and you homing attack across all of them until you can attack him. Attacking him wasn't so hard. We thought it was going to be a lot tougher than it was. Avoiding the attacks was the tough part. It wasn't impossible, but trying to do it successively, back to back, was near impossible. So what I ended up doing was just trying to grab 1 or 2 rings at a time so I could survive the attacks, but when I would get launched to the other side, I would grab the rings over there and continue to do the same. It was just a game of resource management to some degree. I had to be careful of how many rings I grabbed so I could actually survive the later attacks. I made it to the final phase, only to realize that even if I did take the damage, it would throw me off the edge, so I basically had one shot to do it every time I got there, which required very specific timing so I could actually land on the spinning platform and attack him. And the first time I actually did this didn't go so well. So I was going to have to attack him at a very specific moment, which was going to be hard to time with Sonic spinning and the voice controls actually working. But then another thought occurred to me. The light spin attack. It was going to save us once again. And it actually worked. It allowed us to attack Eggman without actually timing our jump. So I finally made it to the end, and then the voice controls didn't work. But eventually I made it there again, and the voice controls worked this time, so I actually beat the game. This was huge. I actually had beat Sonic Adventure with just voice controls, which I didn't think was even going to be possible at first. I had to use every skill I learned in the game on that final boss to actually beat him. It was such an undertaking to do this entire game, but it was possible, and it was all streamed right here on YouTube. If you want to see future content like that, subscribe. But beyond that, this took almost 30 hours to complete, which is absolutely insane. So I'd really appreciate it if you could drop a like on the video if you made it this far. And with that, that's the end of the video. So until next time, see ya.